Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's meeting of the Jones Library Board of Trustees. We're going to do what we have been doing, given the remote nature of our meetings, which is I'm going to ask people to let us know that you can hear us. Farah,
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
Lee Edwards,
Yes.
and I'm Austin Sarrett. We are joined by Bob Parent and, of course, our library director. Before going on to the president's report and the motions, I'd like to invite public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, I see no public comment. Jean?
Yeah, I'm going to recuse myself from the next item of business. So I'll be on mute, but I will continue to take notes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are here to follow up on the response from the Massachusetts Historic Commission to our alternatives analysis. As you know, that alternatives analysis laid out in great detail the various things that the library had done over the years to reach the design decisions that were reached by the Jones Library Building Committee and through the building committee, the town. The Massachusetts Historic Commission identified two items that they wanted to hear more about. One was the roofing material that would be used on the historic portion of the library, and the other was the book drop. And we're meeting today to consider how to respond to those concerns as expressed by the Massachusetts Historic Commission. To facilitate that conversation, I'm going to propose a motion. If that motion is seconded, we'll discuss it. And then when we've discussed it, we'll take a vote as appropriate. And then we will go on to the second motion. Okay, the first motion is to recommend that the town install natural slate instead of synthetic slate, as is currently shown on the Jones Library Expansion Renovations Plan. Removing this slate work from the scope of the project and rebidding this work if deemed to be necessary. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
So this motion is a response to the Massachusetts Historic Commission. Instead of going back to them and trying to explain here's why synthetic, the question is whether we should simply say we are prepared to go back to natural slate. Going back to natural slate will increase the cost of the roofing part of the project. The roofing part of the project can be done by a kind of separate contract rather than requiring the general contractor to rebid. It would be helpful, Bob, if you could just give us a little bit of background, and if you could give us what we know about the cost differential. Bob?
Yes, thank you. Anticipating this question might come up, I already proactively reached out to the Attorney General's office to get a written opinion as to whether or not rebidding the entire project would be required. And the Attorney General has indicated that no, it would not, but that rebidding of the slate roofing portion of the project would be required. And the reason for that is that the value of that cost increase, which I should have the exact number, and none of these numbers are exact. They're estimated numbers. I believe it's about $175,000 that FAA's cost estimator has indicated the change from artificial slate to natural slate could add to the project. Because that value is close to the differential between the number 1 and number 2 roofing bidder, there is the potential, if this project had been bid with natural slate, it could have affected the outcome of the roofing subbids. So the Attorney General has indicated that we do need to rebid that process, that item. It can be done, and they've indicated there's 2 alternatives that I proposed, and they said either one of them would be acceptable. One would be to award a contract to the general contractor, which currently includes the artificial slate, remove that work from the scope of the general contractor's contract, and the value associated with that work from the scope of the contract, and then rebid through a completely standalone contract that natural slate roofing material installation. That would be option 1 that would be available to us. The second option that's available to us would be, since we have not awarded the contract and can't award the contract at this point, we could reject all of the roofing subbids, which covers not just the slate roof, but also covers the remainder of the building expansion area, and rebid that portion of the project the same as we've bid the other trades on the project. At this point, I really don't have a strong opinion. There's pluses and minuses to either strategy, and we don't have to make a decision today in terms of what that strategy is, but we need to do one or the other. Either take it out of the general contractor scope and bid it separately, or keep it within the general contractor scope, but rebid the process through the file subbid process. And that can be done readily within the time that we have available.
Just say again, the cost differential, Bob, would be?
Sharon, I should have the numbers right in front of me. I don't know if you have them handy. It was less than $200,000, I believe. It was about $175,000 differential that FAA's cost estimator, Seamus Fennessy, had developed. It was about a $25 per square foot difference in the slate roof.
Yeah.
Versus the artificial slate.
About 200,000.
Yeah, which is what I told the AG's office prior to having that cost estimate. That's the number that I provided to them.
How would this work in terms of the roofing sub bid? So if we were to say, we don't want to fool around with the roofing sub bid, we want to go out and rebid for the slate. The roofing sub bid that we got includes the synthetic slate thing. So how would that work with the sub bid? In other words, their figure included the synthetic slate.
Correct. It would be a post-contract award negotiation, similar to you have on any other change order that comes up during the course of construction, versus modifying the scope and rebidding it basically from the get-go. And again, as I said, there's pluses and minuses to each one of those approaches.
I want to understand the first. So one would just say to the roofing, we want to change the scope of the work, and you submit a new figure for the work that remains?
We would first issue a work directive that would indicate we want to make this change. That would start the discussion, the negotiation between, and it would be done through FAA as well, because they're weighing in the technical aspects of this. We'd likely start with the estimate that Fennessy has put together and indicate that we believe that reduction, well, using it's actually, at that point, we would be taking the full cost of the slate roof away and then effectively giving that scope to a completely separate contractor. The contractor who's already bid on the project would retain the rest of the roofing scope on this project, and they would be free to bid on the rebid as well. I will note that slate roofing isn't necessarily a type of roofing done by every roofing contractor. So we haven't again put together these documents yet, but I would imagine that FAA would come up with some qualification requirements for a contractor that would be entitled or allowed to bid the slate roof installation. And that may or may not include the low roofing bidder at this point.
Right, what I'm trying to do is to do the math, right? So we're gonna have to spend $200,000 more if we do this. The GC bid was a little below the budget, but I don't have in my head how much below. Do we remember?
I know in total the GC bid, and I can pull up those numbers in a moment, but
Yeah,
the GC bid in total allowed us to go into construction with a little bit over a 10% contingency. Any adjustments that are made to any of the bid numbers, for instance, if we take $200,000 away from the current filed sub-bidder and we add $400,000 to a new contractor, that would be a subtraction from that total contingency amount. It would, that type of adjustment, for instance, $200,000 net impact on the total project cost actually would be lost, not lost, but it would appear in a decimal point beyond the 10%. In the context of this project, it is not a significant change in terms of dollar value and there will be other changes as we go through construction, without a doubt.
I just wanted to be clear, if we can be, that this doesn't necessarily require that we do any more fundraising than we have already done. In other words, the cost of this could be absorbed in the contingency fund pending the further success of the capital campaign project. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Now, it's very important for us to understand that this could be absorbed in the contingency part of the budget, though it would reduce the contingency part of the budget a little bit.
That's an accurate statement, correct.
Sorry?
I'm just curious if this would affect anything in terms of the timeline and signing a contract with the contractor, and would we be signing two contracts? I'm not clear on what that process would be if we're rebidding that.
Sure.
The roof part.
It would be different depending which alternative we ultimately selected. If we signed a contract with the GC for the job as currently bid, after that contract is signed, we would then negotiate a change order to reduce the amount of that total contract. We would then shift that scope of work to a new contractor, plus the additional cost of the natural slate roofing over the artificial slate roofing. And we would have two executed contracts, one with the GC and one with a roofing contractor who is only hired to install the slate roofing on the old portion of the building. The new roofing put on the new portion of the building would stay as is under the contract. So that's under the first option. Under the second option, between now and the time that's allowed under the MBLC grant, we would have time to reject all the roofing filed sub-bids, rebid just the roofing portion of the project, and then whatever adjustment that there might be up or down, because it could go both ways, in that sub-bid amount that was received would then get built into the general contractor's contract. So for instance, if our new filed sub-bid number was $100,000 greater than the previous sub-bid number, the GC's contract would be adjusted by that amount. We would have a single contract with a GC with that adjusted value versus two contracts under the other alternative.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Bob, these two alternatives, how does one go about doing the analysis to figure out whether or not number A is better than number B?
It's tumbling around in my brain right now. I don't make any quick decisions. I start thinking about, the pluses and the minuses, and there are pluses and minuses to both. Anytime you negotiate a change order, it can be difficult, and you may not necessarily realize the full value of the change So that's, that's clearly one weakness that would arrive with having two contracts versus keeping it under the scope of the existing general contractor. On the other hand, and this is just two of the things that come to mind, is you could then ensure that you're hiring a contractor that has the required expertise in slate roofing to do that work. And perhaps it's worth, if there is an increase in value, worth that increase in value because you're making certain you have a contractor. I don't know offhand if our low filed sub-bid roofing contractor is qualified to perform slate roof.
Yep.
So for instance, if we reject all the sub bids and we rebid, that contractor might have to sub that work out to somebody else, which might have an effect on their overall pricing as well. So and the whole, without getting to the minutia of the bidding process, it complicates how the bid gets structured as well.
Okay.
If our subcontractor then has to hire a sub to perform work under their scope.
This is very valuable for us to hear. Before calling on Tammy, I want to remind myself that the motion involves, right, installing natural slate versus synthetic slate. The motion doesn't have anything to do with how the bidding is done.
Right.
So it's good to know and good to hear that. Tammy?
Does the $200,000 include the cost of installation? I don't know if it's more expensive to install natural slate than artificial slate.
Yes, that is the net cost. Effectively, what FAA did was take a look at the total cost of the roofing system, which includes not only the slate material itself and the slate installation, but the plywood underlayment, the insulation, that whole system.
Okay.
Is built into their differential. And the differential, again, is primarily $25 per square foot is what they've used in their analysis.
Okay, thank you.
I think it might be useful for the process if once we make a decision on this, if we vote in favor of it, if we can have a meeting of the Jones Library Building Committee in which these discussions about whether you do this bid or that bid can be just vetted so that people can understand it. Okay, on the motion, anything else about this first motion to install natural slate, removing the slate from the scope of the project and rebidding this work if deemed necessary? Any other discussion of that motion? Okay, are we ready to vote? On the motion, voting yes to approve, no, not to approve, and remember, it's a recommendation to the town. Farah, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lee Edwards,
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes,
Nat,
Yes.
and Austin votes yes. Jean is recused. Okay, a second motion to recommend that the town retain the existing after-hours book drop on the east side of the building instead of installing a new after-hours drop on the front facade as is currently shown on the Jones Library expansion renovation plans, removing this front facade work from the scope of the project and rebidding the work if deemed necessary. Is there a second?
second.
Right. How does this affect cost? Bob?
This would actually be a reduction in project cost, a small reduction. The reality is, although the impact from a historical standpoint may be significant in the eyes of the historic preservation folks, the capital cost associated with it is very small. It's cutting a small hole in the front of the existing building, and it's removing the existing book drop. And as part of the door system that gets installed as a new door at that portion of the library, there's a small window that would get installed to replace where the book drop currently is. So we're talking thousands of dollars, not even tens of thousands of dollars reduction in the project cost. And that's why, from a bidding standpoint, with the AG's logic, it's a de minimis cost that would have no effect on the outcome of the number one or the number two bidder
Right.
with the project, so that rebidding would not be required.
Sharon, can you tell us a little bit about the way in which retaining the existing after-hours book drop will affect the operation of the renovated and expanded library?
So, well, so there's operationally, you know, how it affects staff, and then there's how it affects patrons. This is going to mostly affect patrons, because the location of the existing after-hours book drop, while it's a patron entrance and exit now, it is not going to be once we're renovated. So for patrons wanting to return items when the library is not open, instead of going up to do that at the front door, they're going to have to do it at you know, the east entrance.
Oh.
So it's really more of a a training, you know, patrons will get used to it. You know, they'll know, okay, the library's closed, so I'm going to walk up, you know, this ramp instead of going through the front door. But as far as staff goes, the biggest part for staff was when the automated materials handling system had to be removed. That is where the big staffing issue is going to happen. But as far as, you know, it's still in the same area where staff will be checking in the books. So the books will empty into a big bin, and then they'll be able to roll the bin. And so operationally, it's fine.
So I'm just asking you to remind us of the renovation and expansion is going to reconfigure the library on the east side, on the inside. And so that's what I'm just trying, is this going to work with that reconfigured space?
Correct. Yeah. That won't have to change at all.
Right. And the question about rebidding, or, I mean, that's, Bob, not, you see a significant issue with respect to this particular change?
That's correct. That's something that can readily be negotiated as a reduction in contract value post-contract award.
Okay. So what we are doing is we are basically approving or recommending to the town that the response to the MHC be, we're going to go back to the natural slate, and we're going to go back away from this proposed book drop. And that's the response as part of the 106 process. So is there any other discussion of this motion with respect to the book drop? Yeah, Farah?
Just a quick question for Sharon. Sharon, will this affect anything in terms of the timing for the 106 process?
No, if anything, this will, you know, because time is limited for us, that voting in favor of these motions will help the timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion of this motion? Are we ready to vote? Okay, Farah,
Yes.
Lee Edwards?
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
and Austin votes yes. Jean is recused. I do want to say again what we have said before, which is to express our great gratitude to Bob and colleagues in town who have been really on top of all of these things that we've been trying to get done. And you know, gratitude to the Mass Historic Commission for focusing its attention. And I think we're in a position now where we can respond to the MHC. I do want to make sure that we do schedule a meeting of the Jones Library Building Committee, just to make sure everybody on the building committee is aware of these changes and what their implications are. And I want to reiterate my understanding that going to natural slate does not require us to raise any more money than we are already committed to raising. Okay, with that, I think I wish you all a healthy, happy, and hopefully democratic 2025. We're adjourned.
Thank you.